Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to Omogi, servants of Yahuwah. And we're going to do a little bit something different this week because it is the season of Hanukkah. We normally go over our Torah portions and in the book of Shemot right now, but we're going to deviate that for this Sabbath because we're going to talk about a little bit about Hanukkah. The truth about Hanukkah, or the Maccabean vote, and it's finding faithfulness and strength in times of great tribulation. That's sometimes hard to do. All right. So let's go over a little bit of I'm going to go over a little bit of an overview of Hanukkah, what it is, and some truth about it, and some myths about it. But Hanukkah is a festival often surrounded by the stories and symbols that, while meaningful and culturally, are not rooted in the original historical or biblical account. So it's not necessarily what you would find inside of our Bibles that we have here today. Okay, it is important to remember clearly that what Hanukkah is and what it is not, because there is a lot of myth about Hanukkah and a lot of tradition about Hanukkah. We're going to talk about where that comes from and what exactly does the story of Hanukkah actually say. So that our celebration honors, we want to, and what it's not, so that our celebration honors Yah. We want to keep something in honor of what He has done. We want to make sure that we're down to what it says, so that we can honor Him and not human fables or traditions. Hanukkah, which means dedication, commemorates the rededication of the Second Temple in Jerusalem after it was desecrated by, that's right, Antiochus Epiphanes around 167 before Christ. The altar had been profaned. Do we know how the altar had been profaned? Yeah, oink oink. He came in and sacrificed a pig upon the altar of Yah. Did you know that that's not the first time that actually had happened? That's actually happened a few times in history. Yes, I'm actually working on something to show you that this what we're talking about, actually, we're going to get into, it actually is a reference that the book of Maccabees calls the abomination that causes desolation. Actually, it's what the prophet Daniel was speaking about that was to come. So when Yeshua says, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, that was spoken through the prophet Daniel, then you got to go to Daniel and see what Daniel was talking about. I believe that's Daniel 9 through 11 right there. And then you go in to see that it was talking about what Antiochus Epiphanes did to the temple during that time. But understand, prophecy has multiple layers, right? So when Yeshua says, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, he's speaking prophetically to the future. You know, of course, if you're one of his disciples, you would have already understood that was a phrase that was mentioned in the book of Hanukkah, right? So they're probably sitting there going, wait a second, hadn't this already happened? And Yeshua is saying, yes, it has, but Yahweh declares the end from the very beginning, and He gives us patterns to each generation. Prophecy is something that Yah speaks to in every generation. So it is something that will happen again. What did He do? Well, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. In short, He offered a pig upon the altar, desecrating the altar. Okay, so the altar had been profaned. The temple, He plundered it, and faithful Israelites faced threats to their very lives if they continued to follow Yah, their Elohim, and His Torah. In response, His faithful remnant, Yahuwah's elect of that generation, led by a family by the name of Maccabees, took up arms, and they cleansed the temple and reestablished the worship according to the Torah. This was a national day of remembrance, a historical monument of courage and faithfulness. Hanukkah is not a festival or feast or moedim of Yahuwah, or it is commanded by Him. So let's make that very clear. This is not a commanded moedim, and we have to honor it as such, or to realize it, so that we don't necessarily put it on the same scale as a commanded moedim, but it is something that we know that Messiah did honor and keep. Therefore, in a traditional way, it is something that Yah honored, because obviously He gave victory to the people of this generation. And we're going to find out why. The original observance of Hanukkah was one day, by the way, making the rededication of the temple and the restoration of the altar. Lighting lamps was a part of that dedication ritual, but there's no biblical record of a miraculous supply of oil. The story of oil lasting 8 days appears centuries later in the Talmud, and that's where the Shabbat 21b, and it's a rabbinic tradition meant to honor the dedication and it encourages devotion. but it is not a part of Scripture, nor does it carry any covenant weight. Okay? The truth about Hanukkah, the biblical menorah, second. Lighting the 9-branch candle holder is not scriptural. Oh, this is a pet peeve of mine. It's not scriptural, nor according to the original story of Hanukkah. It's nothing short of an abomination to Yah, because it desecrates the pattern commanded by to Moshe within the Torah concerning the menorah. This is. Now, I mean, this is just something I made a long time ago, but I've always had a love for the menorah, you know. The 7-branch candlestick, not 9, the menorah, was commanded by Yahuwah in Exodus 25, verses 31 through 40. Crafted of pure gold, not muffler pipe and spray painted, and placed within the tabernacle. It stood as a sacrifice. You know, I had this built. I drew it up and planted it, and a buddy of mine, me and my buddy, built it. That was probably 25 years ago, something like that. Just a muffler pipe is what it is. But at the time, I didn't know anybody who had one like this. That thing stands like almost 7 feet. I think it does stand there. It stood as a sacred vessel in the holy place, illuminating the sanctuary continuously. And then you find that in Leviticus 24, 1 through 4. So if you would, turn with me to in your Bible. So we're getting some Torah here. But if you would turn to me the book of Vayikra, or Leviticus 24, 1 through 4. Leviticus 24, 1 through 4. And then Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, command the sons of Israel that they bring to you clean oil from beaten olives for the light, to make a lamp burning continually, outside the vessel of the testimony of the tent of meeting. That's talking about outside of the Holy of Holies, but it said it in the holy place. Aaron shall keep it in its order from evening until morning before Yahuwah continuously. It shall be a permanent statute throughout your generation. Permanent meaning forever, right? How long is forever? Olam means forever. And Yeshua defined it as until heaven and earth are recreated. He shall keep the lamp in order on the pure gold lampstand before Yahuwah continually. And if you would please turn with me to Exodus 25, just a few pages down, in that book. Exodus 25, verses 31. Shemot, Exodus 25, 31 through 40. Then you shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand, its base, and its shaft are to be made of hammered work. Its cups, its bulbs, and its flowers shall be of one piece within it. 6 branches shall go out from its sides. 3 branches of the lampstand from one side, and 3 branches of the lampstand from its other side. Talk about these branches here, not this one. Yeah. 3 cups shall be shaped like almond blossoms on one branch, a bulb and a flower, and 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms on the other branch, and a bulb and a flower. The same for 6 branches going out from the lampstand. And on the lampstand 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms, its bulbs and its flowers. A bulb shall be under the first pair of branches coming out of it, and a bulb under the second pair of branches coming out of it, and a bulb under the third pair of the branches coming out of it. For the 6 branches coming out of the lampstand, their bulbs and their branches shall be of one piece with it. All of it shall be one piece of hammered work of pure gold. Then you shall make its lamps 7 in number, and they shall mount its lamps as so to shed light on the space in front of it. Its tongue and its tray shall be of pure gold. It shall be made from a talent of pure gold with all of its utensils. See that you make them by the pattern for them, which is shown to you on the mountain. So clearly a menorah, even within the story of Hanukkah, They have the what's called the Hanukkah, where it has 9 branches to it. That is incorrect according to the Torah. The rabbinic menorah. Now, we talked about the biblical menorah, but we're going to talk about the rabbinic menorah. The 9-branch Hanukkah is not found in the Torah. It is not found written anywhere in the prophets. It is not found written anywhere in the writings, nor even in all of the Apocrypha. Its origins lies in rabbinic traditions surrounding Hanukkah, a festival commemorating the rededication of the temple during the Maccabean revolt. While 1 and 2 Maccabees recounts the cleansing of the altar and the 8-day celebration, Maccabees, 1 Maccabees 4, 52 through 59, they make no mention of a miraculous oil lasting 8 days. The story of the oil is a later fable popularized by Talmudic writings centuries after this event. So in other words, it's a rabbinic lore. Like I said a while ago, I love the story of it. It's just a tradition. It's just a myth, and it's a pretty myth. I like it. But when they add to Yah's word to create a 9-branch menorah, they are going contrary to the Torah, and by doing so, it makes this part of it an abomination, because we are not allowed to add to Yah's Torah, because the Torah and the prophets are the foundation of understanding all of Yah's word, right? The heart of Hanukkah, and I'm going over some just a short. The story of Hanukkah can rightly be remembered as a historical moment of courage, extreme courage, by the way, extreme faith, dedication, but it is not, I repeat this again, it is not a festival commanded in Torah whatsoever. The story of Hanukkah is about honoring Yah by remembering the true heart of Hanukkah, the courage of men and women so long ago, who remained faithful to Yah, obedient to the Torah, and did so in the face of great tribulation, and they were faithful even to the point of death. Hanukkah is about the joy of the restoration of the temple of Yah, the joy about restoring its priesthood and its services, and the call for all who call upon the name of Yah, who follow Yah, to return to him in covenant relationship and covenant obedience to his Torah. The story of Hanukkah, we're talking the Maccabean revolt, the story of Hanukkah is not mentioned in the Bible, but it is a part of the vision and timeline of the prophet Daniel. And you can read about that in Daniel 9 through 11 right there. The story of Hanukkah first, because of the timeline. Basically, the timeline of the Hanukkah is between the writings of Malachi and Matthew. There's a 400-year gap right there that this time period was written of. So Daniel prophesies about this time frame. But unless you really understand the prophet Daniel, you will not understand what he's trying to say. The story of Hanukkah first appears in the book of Maccabees, one of the texts we call the Apocrypha. And I brought some of my books for you guys if you want to look at. But Apocrypha, there are 14 extra biblical books that, I call them biblical books, that were actually once a part of our Bible, but they are not today for some reason. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a second. According to 1 Maccabees, the Hellenistic Syrian king Antiochus IV Epiphanes invaded Judea and tried to Hellenize the Jews. Now, do you guys know what the Hellenization of Jews mean? Hellenization, yeah. It was a term that means the forcing and the forced acceptance and practices of Greek culture, Greek laws, and the worship of the Greek gods started by the conquest of Alexander the Great. King Antiochus Epiphanes desecrated the second temple in Jerusalem by dedicating it to the Greek god Zeus. He also, now I want you to listen to this, guys, because this is what Daniel the prophet proclaims is the abomination that causes desolation. Yahweh declares the end from the very beginning, so that if we want to understand the end, we've got to understand what he did in the beginning. So there are pictures and shadows for us to see what's going to happen in the future. So when he says that when you see the abomination that causes desolation, all you got to go back in history and see what it was. Then it would be close to, if not a shadow picture, of what will be. He dedicated the temple of Yah to the Greek god Zeus, his god Zeus. He erected a golden statue of Zeus in the courtyard, and he sacrificed swine upon the altar of Yah, an unclean animal according to Torah on the altar of Yah, which according to the book of Maccabees is referred to as the abomination of desolations. This abominable act sparked the Maccabean revolt led by Mattathias Maccabee and his son Judas Maccabee, who fought to defend the name of their Elohim, Yahuwah, and to defend the obedience and practice of Torah. Many Jews of this time did not accept they did not adopt to his enforcement of the Greek culture that was being enforced upon them. They joined together and took up arms against him, including some of the priests that served in the temple. Judas Maccabeus, also called the Hammer, who successfully stood against the armies of Antiochus and Rome itself for a time. He defeated them, and then he rededicated the temple in 164 BC. That is what the story of Hanukkah, if you want to condense it down to a bowl of gravy, that's exactly what this story is. So I'm going to rabbit trail a little bit. The Apocrypha. In case you do not know, I'm going to use some terms here that, I want to teach a little bit about. The Apocrypha. One of the books that is in the Apocrypha is called the Book of Maccabees. Actually, there's a bunch of books there. The Apocrypha is a list of books that are not included in today's Hebrew Bible canon. These books were written between the timeline of the Old Testament, Malachi, and the New Testament of Matthew. There was about a 400-year somewhat gap right there, that this time frame, and all of these writings in the Book of Apocrypha was written in. The books were written between the timeline of the Old and New Testament, and several books were written that are known as, these books are known as what we call the Apocrypha. The books include the 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Tobit, Judith, and others. They are not a part of the Hebrew Bible today, but so that you will know, they once were. They were included in the Septuagint, and that is a Greek translation of the Old Testament, and I have a Septuagint right there if you want to look at it. It is the Greek translation of the Torah and the prophets and the writings. And there's a whole story about why we have the Septuagint. Okay? That they were included in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, that the generation of Messiah, now listen to this, guys, that the generation of Messiah and the apostles used, taught, and accepted. Taught from and accepted. In other words, the book of the Apocrypha was also found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, meaning they held them the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Essenes, they held them as important inspired text. The fact that the Yeshua, his generation, they did it. All but Matthew is all written in Greek, so the Hellenization, the acceptance of the Greek language had penetrated before they were even born, before they were even on the earth. So most of our New Testament writings are written in Greek because that was the primary language of their time. Besides the book of Matthew. The book of Matthew was written in Hebrew, by the way. So the Essenes, they were found with the Apocrypha and other books, all the War Scrolls, everything. A lot of other writings were found within the Dead Sea Scrolls. So obviously, in the mindset of the Essenes, they were something to keep and honor to record because they recorded them, kept them for us to find centuries later. The book of the Apocrypha was also found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, meaning they held them as important inspired text. The term canon is used to describe the books that that are divinely inspired and therefore belong in the Bible, or what they deem to be in the Bible. Have you ever wondered how we have the Bible, the books that are in the Bible today? What that means is that there were men so long ago that came together and they deemed these certain books should be called the Bible, or books of the Bible, or what we call the term canonized. The term canonized is used to describe the books that are divinely inspired and therefore belong in the Bible, or at least they chose them to be in the Bible. The difficulty, and I want you to hear this, the difficulty in determining the biblical canonization is that the Bible does not of itself give us a list of books that belong in it. Hello? Yeah. Nowhere in it do we see that a prophet says, by the way, you shall put these books only within this and consider it to be inspired, and that's it. There's no commandment there to do that at all. However, we do have an outline of what Scripture, like the Torah and the prophets and the writings. We do have an order, but understand that there are a lot of other books that were written during this time. There are books that are mentioned in the Bible that we do not even know about, by the way. Did you know that? That they are erased from we don't know. There's a few books that the Bible the writers of the Bible do mention within Scripture that we do not have. They disappeared from humanity. The books of the prophet was also, okay, sorry, I said that. The term canon is used to describe the books that are divinely inspired and therefore belong in the Bible. The difficulty in determining the biblical canonization is that the Bible does not give us a list of books that belongs within inside of itself. So to determine the canon was a process conducted first by Jewish rabbis and scholars, and later by the early Catholic Church around 400 AD. Actually, it was a little bit before, like 392. The Protestant Reformers, John Hess, people like that, if you understand your church history, including Martin Luther, rejected the Apocrypha books as part of Scripture because they were not a part of the Hebrew canon and did not meet his test of inspiration. In other words, because the writings didn't fit within his theology, he determined that they weren't inspired. And by the way, did you know that he also said the same thing about the epistles of Peter, the epistles of John, and the book of Revelation?
And James.
Oh, yeah, I forgot James. He rejected these books because they teach us that faith without is... And if you study Martin Luther, he was real big about just believing, and that's it. Yeah. In the end of his life, in the first of his life, he loved the Jewish people, and in his writings, he was trying his best to go and to preach Messiah to them, but preaching a lawless Messiah to Jews is going to fail every time, because they're underneath Deuteronomy 13 that tells them that if anybody comes to you preaching another Elohim other than Yah and they're speaking against the Torah, then you're not to listen to them. That's the problem with mainline Christianity today, who are trying to preach the gospel to Jews or to Judaism. That is not how you make Judah jealous. You make Judah jealous by being obedient to Yah's word, being faithful to Yah. That's how you make them jealous, seeing that through your faith in Yah, that you are being obedient to Torah. The Apocrypha, hold on. So, where was I at? The Apocrypha often refers to where did I miss it? Did I turn my page? Oh, yeah, I did. The Apocrypha, while often referring to a single entity, actually consists of a diverse set of books written over a long period of time. Remember, I said about 400 years between the Malachi and Matthew, about 400 years before Messiah. In fact, the books were written roughly between 400 and 200 BCE. The Hellenistic period went from the death of Alexander the Great up into just before the 1st century. This was the time when the Jews, both in the land and in the diaspora, absorbed a lot of Greek language and culture. Remember what I was saying? That by the time Messiah came, pretty much the Greek language had already infiltrated all of that area because of Alexander the Great. And of course, because of the Maccabean revolt against this, the mixing of the Greek culture with the Israelites is a big no-no to Yah. This was a time when the Jews, both in the land and the diaspora, absorbed a lot of Greek language and culture. Part of the result of this was that many Jews were writing new religious texts in Greek. Now, if you've ever watched some of the rabbis today as to why they have a problem with certain quotes in the New Testament, it's because they primarily use what's called the Masoretic text, which I have that over here if you want to see it. The Masoretic text is only about 1,200 years old, where the Septuagint text, the codex for the original codex by which we have our Bible, the books of the Bible, they are using something that's only about 1,200 years old, and the New Testament writers weren't quoting from the Masoretic text. They were quoting from the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scripture of that time. Yes. So the Greek Septuagint is way older than the Masoretic text. However, the Masoretic text is also where we get our vowel points to the Hebrew language, too, by the way.
I was just going to say, the Septuagint is based on something as well.
A 72,
Yeah, and it just kind of shows you.
it's talking about the Jewish the story behind it is there was a Grecian king that wanted a copy of a Torah. He was a believer in the Elohim of Israel. He had converted. And so he wanted a copy of the Torah and the prophets. And so I believe it was 72 rabbis came together to write him this, and they did so, and that's what we have in the form of, this was a long time ago. Like you were saying, Brandon, about 2,300 years ago is what we are putting the time of where the Septuagint comes from. So many years, during the time that we're talking about right now. Okay? Part of the result of this was that many of the Jews were writing new religious texts in Greek rather than Hebrew. Remember that the New Testament, for example, was written mostly in Greek, except the book of Matthew, that was written in Hebrew. Some Jews so understand that there was a multi-language in their culture during the time of Messiah. They could speak Greek, they could speak Hebrew, they could speak Aramaic. Some Jews may have seen these writings as being less authentic in books written in Hebrew. For this reason and others, Jewish leaders rejected the Apocrypha. It's also one of the reasons why they also want to add to why they reject a lot of the New Testament too. The Apocrypha is intimately tied to the Septuagint. So the Apocrypha, it goes together. That's why it was in it originally. The Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. All the writings of the New Testament, all of the writers of the New Testament refer to the Septuagint when they're quoting, it is written. They are not quoting from the Masoretic text. And if you've ever studied any of the reasons, I'm not going to name any rabbis, but don't name them. One of their main arguments is, well, you Christians are mistranslating that the New Testament writers didn't say this when they were saying it's written and going back to the Old Testament. The reason for this is because they're quoting from the new Masoretic text that's been changed when the apostles were quoting from the Septuagint, which does say what they say. So they rejected a lot of the Jewish people also rejected the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha is intimately tied to the Septuagint and the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And all the writings of the New Testament references are made to the Septuagint when they quote it. Many New Testament authors refer to expressions and images from the Apocrypha. And catch this one. Many New Testament authors refers to expressions and images that come from the Apocrypha. And many believe they quoted directly from the Apocrypha. Scholars don't know for sure whether those authors were reading the Apocrypha books or whether the stories they referred to were just already part of the Jewish culture in the first century. All of this indicates that for some Christians in the first century, these books might have been considered canonized to them. In other words, for short, more than likely, the Messiah and his apostles felt this was inspired, because when you read their writings, there is a lot of quotation, a lot of imagery that comes from these books. A lot. Did the early church fathers know the Apocrypha? While the New Testament authors may have made references or quotations from the Apocrypha, several early church fathers, the converts of the apostles, and I'm talking about the direct converts, those who John led to Christ, okay, who Peter led to Christ. We're talking their first converts. Actually, they actually directly quoted from it's not a question if they accepted the Apocrypha as inspired. They directly mention it and quote from it. The first century documents called First Clement quotes from the Wisdom of Solomon. He directly says what he's quoting from. Clement of Rome was an early church father and a first follower of the Apostle John. Clement was recognized as one of the apostolic fathers who personally witnessed the martyrdom of both Peter and Paul. He was an eyewitness. Yeah. Also, the early church father Polycarp, a direct disciple of the Apostle John, refers indisputably from the Apocrypha. You think it was important to them? Guys, we're talking about the people who sit underneath the Apostle John and learn directly from him. If the Apocrypha wasn't important, surely John would have sat there and said, guys, these books we don't accept. I mean, that's pretty clear to me. So there are those who may think that the Apocrypha is fable and that we shouldn't read it. They don't know the word very well. Or history. Now, I'm not saying that we should elevate this to the same level as we do our Bible. I'm not saying that at all. Inspired just simply means, or a lot of that it's God breathed. That He directed it to be written. Okay. Now, understand and finding truth, we find truth that Yah gave us the Torah and the prophets and the writings of Messiah as a foundation by which we can test all things. I am not saying that they are equal to, but I'm saying that these people, a lot of them put these writings up there as inspired. Why we don't today? This shows that many of the first disciples of Christ accepted the apocryphal books as inspired scripture. The Apocrypha was included by the way, the Apocrypha was in the original King James Bible of 1611. It was placed between the Old and New Testament for historical purposes. So those who said it was never part of our Bible need to study a little bit harder. Be a good Berean. However, it was later removed from the King James Bible in the 17th century, with the final removal occurring in the 19th century, so up to very recently. In other words, these books were once a part of our Bible. They were once read as inspired. But yet in the last 100 or 200 years, they have been taken out of the Bible for some reason. And the more that you study the Apocrypha, and the more the enlightenment of the Torah comes to us, we see why it was taken out.
Some Catholic Bibles still have them in it.
Some of them do. You're right. Some of them. So if you would, I want to read just a little bit of the actual story of Hanukkah. So if you would turn with me, if you have the book of Maccabees, or if you could just follow me on the board if you want to, if you don't have a book. If you want a book, I have my big book there. We'll have the story of Maccabees there, or if you want to. So first Maccabees 1, we're just for the first 2 chapters here. I'm going to read just a few chapters in each book, 1 Maccabees and 2 Maccabees, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. And first Maccabees 1, and it happened, or do I have some readers? Come on up, Brandon. Do you want to come up and read? Scroll if you want to. Go ahead.
All right. What's the chapter and verse?
Chapter 1.
Okay. And it came to pass after Alexander the Macedon, the son of Philip, who came from the land of Chittim, had utterly defeated Darius, the king of the Medes and Persians, that he reigned in his stead, and as he had before reigned over Greece. And he waged many wars and captured fortresses and slaughtered the kings of the earth. And he made his way to the ends of the earth and despoiled a multitude of nations. The whole earth was silent before him, and he became exalted, and his heart was uplifted. He mustered very high, mighty army, and ruled over the lands and the rulers of the heathen, and they paid him tribute. And afterward he fell sick, and he knew that he was going to die. So he called his distinguished servants who had been brought up with him, and divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. Alexander had reigned 12 years when he died. His servants succeeded him, each in his own domain, and after his death they all put on crowns, as did their sons after them, for many years, and they did much evil on the earth. There sprang from them a sinful shoot named Antiochus Epiphanes, the son of King Antiochus. He had been a hostage in Rome, and he became king in the 137th year of the Greek kingdom. In those days there arose out of Israel lawless men who persuaded many, saying, "Let us go and make a treaty with the heathen around us, for ever since the time we came or became separated from them, many misfortunes have overtaken us." The plan seemed good in their eyes, and some of the people went eagerly to the king, and he authorized them to introduce the practices of the heathen. And they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem in the heathen fashion, and submitted to uncircumcision, and disowned the holy agreement, or the holy covenant. And they allied themselves with the heathen and became the slaves of wrongdoing.
They uncircumcised themselves.
Yep. Became heathen. And when his rule appeared to the Antiochus to be established, he conceived the idea of becoming king of the land of Egypt, so that he might reign over the two kingdoms. So he entered Egypt with a strong force, chariots and elephants and cavalry and a great fleet. And he made war with Ptolemy, king of Egypt. And Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many fell wounded. And they captured the walled cities and in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. After subduing Egypt in the 143rd year, Antiochus turned back and came up against Israel and entered Jerusalem with a strong force. And in his arrogance he went into the sanctuary and took the gold altar and lampstand for the light and all its furniture, and the table for the presentation of bread, and the cups and the bowls and the gold censers and the curtain and the crowns and the gold ornamentation on the front of the temple, for he stripped it all off. And he took the silver and the gold and the choice dishes, and he took the secret treasures which he found, and he took them all and went back into his country. He massacred people and spoke with great arrogance. And there was a great mourning everywhere throughout Israel. Rulers and elders groaned, girls and young men fainted away, and the beauty of the women was altered. Every bridegroom began to lament, and she that sat in the bridal chamber grieved. The very earth was shaken over its inhabitants, and the whole household of Jacob was covered with shame. After 2 years, the king sent an officer to collect tribute to the towns of Judah, and he entered Jerusalem with a strong force. He spoke to them craftily in peaceful terms, and they trusted him.
Peace.
Then he suddenly fell upon the city and struck a great blow and destroyed many of the people in Israel. Sudden destruction. He plundered the city and burned it down and tore down the houses in it and the walls around it. And they took the women and children captive and possessed themselves of the cattle. They fortified the city of David with a great and strong wall, with strong towers, and it became their citadel. And they put sinful heathens there who did not obey the law, and they entrenched themselves there. And they stored up weapons and provisions, and they collected the spoils of Jerusalem and laid them up there. And they became a great threat, and it proved a place of ambush against the sanctuary and a wicked adversary to Israel constantly. And they shed innocent blood all around in the sanctuary and polluted the sanctuary itself. The inhabitants of Jerusalem fled away because of them, and she became a place where strangers lived, and she became strange to her own offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into grief. Her Sabbaths became a reproach. Her honor became contempt. Her dishonor was as great as her glory had been, and her exaltation was turned into grief. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that they should all become one people, and everyone should give up his particular practices. And all
Give
the
up
heathen,
the law.
Yep.
Give up the Torah.
And all the heathen assented to the command of the king, and many from Israel agreed to his kind of worship and offered sacrifice to idols, and broke the Sabbath. And the king sent word by messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah to follow practices according to the country, and put stop to whole burnt offerings, sacrifices, drink offerings, at the sanctuary, and break the Sabbaths, and profane the feast, and pollute the sanctuary, and sanctified. To build altars and sacrifice precincts in idol temples, and sacrifice hogs and unclean cattle, and to leave their sons uncircumcised and defile themselves with every unclean profane practice, so that they might forget the law and change all the religious ordinances. And anyone who did not obey the command of the king should die. He wrote to his whole kingdom to this effect, and he appointed inspectors over all the people, and he ordered the towns of Judah, every one of them, to offer sacrifice. And many of the people, and everyone who was ready to forsake the law, joined them, and they did wrong in the land, and forced Israel to hide in every hiding place they had. On the 15th day of Caslev, or the 9th month, in the 145th year, he erected a dreadful desecration upon the altar, and in towns of Judah round about they built altars in the doors of their houses, and their squares they burnt incense, and wherever they found the book of the law they tore them up and burned them. And if anyone was found to possess the book of the agreement or respected the law, the king's decree condemned him to death.
Yeah, so if you believed in keeping y'all's Torah, you believed in keeping Sabbath, and eating clean, he decreed it that you should be put to death.
The Israelites who appeared from month to month in the towns they treated with force, and on the 25th of the month they offered sacrifice upon the altar which was set up on the altar of burnt offering. The women who had circumcised children they put to death under the decree, hanging the babies around their necks, and destroying their families and the men who had circumcised them. Yet many in Israel stood firm and resolved in their hearts not to eat what was unclean.
So
Interesting.
many of them stood up and said, we don't care what the king says. We're going to follow Yah, be faithful, even unto death.
And they preferred death to being polluted with food.
They died when all they had to have done was just eat something unclean, but they chose rather to suffer torment and death just to keep the dietary laws.
Yep. Polluted with food or profaning the sacred agreement, so they died, and Israel suffered intensely.
That's the whole chapter.
Yeah, this whole chapter.
You want to read 2?
All right.
Chapter 2.
All right. In those days, Matthias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, the priest of the sons of Joab, removed from Jerusalem and settled in Modin. He had 5 sons: John, surnamed Gadi; Simon, called Thassi; Judas, called Maccabeus; Eleazar, called Avram; and Jonathan, called Aphas. He saw the impious things that were going on in Judah and Jerusalem, and he said, Alas, why was I born to witness the ruin of my people and the ruin of the holy city, and to sit by while it's being given up to its enemies and sanctuary to aliens? Her temple has come to be like a man disgraced. Her glorious furniture has been captured and carried off. Her infant children have been killed in her streets, her young men with the enemy's sword. What nation has not appropriated? What kingdom has not seized her spoils? Her adornment has all been taken away. Instead of a free woman, she has become a slave. Behold, our sanctuary and our beauty and our glory have been laid waste, and the heathen have profaned them. Why should we live any longer? And Matthias and sons tore open their clothes and put on sackcloth and grieved bitterly. Then the king's officers who were forcing the people to give up their religion came to the town of Modin and to make them offer sacrifice. And many Israelites went to them. And Matthias and his sons gathered together. The king's messengers answered and said to Matthias, You are a leading man, great and distinguished in this town, surrounded with sons and brothers. Now be the first to come forward and carry out the king's command, as all the heathen and the sons and men of Judah and those who are left in Jerusalem have done. And you and your sons will be counted among the friends of the king. And you and your sons will be distinguished with presents of silver and gold and with many royal commissions.
Going to buy them off.
Yeah. Then Matthias answered and said in a loud voice, If all the heathen in the king's dominions listen to him and forsake each of them the religion of their forefathers and choose to follow the commands instead, yet I and my sons and my brothers will live in accordance with the agreement of our forefathers. God forbid that we should abandon the law and the ordinances. We will not listen to the message of the king or depart from our religion to right hand or to the left. As he ceased to utter these words, a Jew went up before the eyes of all of them to offer a sacrifice as the king commanded on the altar in Modin. And Matthias saw him and was filled with zeal. And his heart was stirred, and he was very properly roused to anger. Properly. And ran up and slaughtered him upon the altar. At the same time he killed the king's officer who was trying to compel them to sacrifice, and he tore down the altar. Thus he showed his zeal for the law, just as Phinehas did to Zimri, the son of Salom. Then Matthias cried out in a loud voice in the town and said, "Let everybody who is zealous for the law stand by the agreement, come out after me."
All who belong to Yah, come stand next to me. I think I've heard that before.
Moshe. And Levi's golden altar.
No, this is referenced directly to the Torah.
Mm-hmm. And he and his sons fled to the mountains and left all they possessed in the town. Then many seekers of uprightness and justice went down into the wilderness to settle, and their sons and their wives and their cattle, because their hardships had become so severe. And the news reached the king's agents and the forces that were in Jerusalem and the city of David, that men who disregard the king's order had gone down to the hiding places in the wilderness, and had pursued them in the forest and overtook them and pitched their camp against them and prepared to attack them on the Sabbath day. And he said to them, "Enough, come out and do as the king commands, and you will live." And they said, "We will not come out, nor will do as the king commands, and break the Sabbath." Then they hastened to attack them, and they made no response to them. They did not throw a stone at them, nor block up their hiding places, for they said, "Let us all die guiltless. We call heaven and earth to witness that you destroyed us unlawfully." So they attacked them on the Sabbath, and they died, and their wives and children and their cattle, and the number of 1,000 people on the Sabbath day. And Matthias and his friends learned of it, and they grieved bitterly over them, and they said to one another, if we all do as our brothers have done, and refuse to fight against the heathen for our lives and what we believe in is right, they will very soon destroy us from the face of the earth. On that day they reached this decision: if anyone attacks us on the Sabbath day, let us fight against them and not all die as our brothers died in the hiding places. Then they were joined by a company of Hasidians, warlike Israelites, every one a volunteer for the law. And all who had fled to escape harsh treatment joined them and reinforced them. And they mustered a force and struck down sinners in their anger and in their wrath, those who disobeyed the law, and the rest fled to the heathen to save themselves. And Matthias and his friends went about and tore down the altars and forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised children that they had found within the limits of Israel. And they drove the arrogant before them, and the work prospered in their hands. So they rescued the law from the hands of the heathen and their kings, and would not let the sinner triumph. And when the time drew near for Matthias to die, he said to the sons, "Arrogance and reproach have now grown strong. It is a time of disaster and hot anger. Now, my children, you must be zealous for the law, and give your lives for the agreement of our forefathers. Remember the deeds of the forefathers, which they did in generations, and you will win great glory and everlasting renown. Was not Abraham found faithful when he was tried, and it was credited to him for uprightness? Joseph, in his time of distress, observed the commandment and became master of Egypt. Phinehas, our forefather, for his intense zeal, obtained the promise of the everlasting priesthood. Joshua, for carrying out his orders, became a judge in Israel. Caleb, for bearing witness before the congregation, obtained an inheritance in the land. David, for being merciful, inherited a royal throne forever. Elijah, for his intense zeal for the law, was caught up into the heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael had faith in God and were saved from the fire. Daniel, for his innocence, and was delivered from the mouths of the lions. Observe this from generation to generation: none who hope in him will fail in strength. Do not be afraid of the words of a sinful man, or for his glory will turn into dung and worms. Today he will be exalted, and tomorrow he will be nowhere to be found, for he has turned to dust, and what he plotted will perish. My children, be manful and strong for the law, for by it you will obtain glory. For now here is Simon, your brother, I know that he is a man of discretion. You must always listen to him. He will be a father to you. And Judas Maccabeus has been a warlike from his youth. He will be your captain and conduct the people's warfare. You must gather about you all who observe the law and avenge the wrongs of your people. Pay back the heathen for what they have done, and give heed to what the law commands. Then he blessed them and was guided to his forefathers. He died in the 146th year and was buried in the tombs of his forefathers in Odin. And all Israel made a loud lamentation for him.
Well, that was First Maccabees. That's just first 2 chapters. There are many more chapters, but the rest of the book, we're not going to go over. Just when you have time, go home, read it. But it just speaks about the military conquest of Judas Maccabee and the victory and battles that he fought. Now, I want to go to 2 Maccabees, to chapter 6 right fast, because I'm going to change. The first Maccabees speaks about all the battles and wars that they fought against this Antiochus Epiphanes. However, 2 Maccabees talks a little bit different language than this. So let's turn to 2 Maccabees 6. This is the book of martyrs here. At the same time that this is going on, there were certain Jewish people that were sent to the presence of this king as a witness to him that they would not obey him. If you would, 2 Maccabees 6, verse 1, it says, "Not long after the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the Torah of their fathers, the law of their fathers, and not to live after the law of their God, and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympius, and that in Gerizim, of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. The coming in of the mischief was sore and grievous to the people, for the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, the Goyim, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy place. And besides, they brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the Torah forbids, the law forbids. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath or any of the day of fasting, Yom Kippur, or to profane himself at all to be a Jew. And in the days of the king's birth, every month they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the fast of Barkuas was kept, I have no idea what that is, but the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Barkuas carrying ivies. Moreover, they went out a decree to their neighbor cities and of the heathens by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews, that they should observe the same festival as a Greek festival, the same fashion, and to be partakers of their sacrifices. And whosoever would not conform themselves to the manner of the Gentiles should be put to death. The mighty of a man, then might a man was seen the present misery. For there were 2 women brought who had circumcised their children, who they had openly led around by the city, the babes hanged by their breasts. They cast them down headlong from the wall, and others that had run together in caves nearby to keep the Sabbath day secretly, by being discovered by Philip, were all burnt together, because they made a conscious to help themselves for the honor of the most sacred day. Now I beseech those that read this book that they be not discouraged for their calamities, but that they judge these punishments not to be for destruction, but for chastising our nation. For it is a token of this great goodness, when wicked doers are not suffered any longer, but forthwith punished. For not as with other nations, whom the Lord patient forbearance to punish, till they be come in the fullness of their sin, so dealeth with us, lest that, being come to the height of sin, afterwards he should have taken vengeance on us. and therefore he never withdrew his mercy from us. And though he punished with adversities, yet doeth he never forsake his people. But let this that we had spoken be for a warning unto us. And now we will come to the declaring of the matter of the few words. Eleazar, one of the principal scribes, an aged man and of a well-favored countenance, was constrained to open his mouth and to eat swine's flesh. But he chose rather to die gloriously than to live stained with such an abomination, spit it forth, and came to his own accord to the torment. And he behooved them to come, that a result to stand against such things as are not lawful for love of life to be tasted. In other words, what he's trying to say is they came to him and said, we'll spare your life if you will just pretend that you're eating a piece of unclean meat, so that by your actions as an elder it will influence the younger to do the same, to profane themselves. He chose rather to die. As it behooved them to come, that our result to stand against such things that are not lawful for love of life to be tasted. But they had the charge that of wicked feast, for the old acquaintances they had with the man, taking him aside. So some of his friends came to him and besought him to bring flesh of his own provision. In other words, hey man, we'll just bring something that you will eat. His own friends would come to him saying, man, they're going to kill you if you don't do this. Here, man, if there's something that you just pretend, just here, let me go get a piece of meat that you say that you will eat. But he replies, such as was lawful for him to use, and make as if he did eat of the flesh taken from the sacrifice commanded by the king, that in so doing he might be delivered from death, and for the old friendship with them find favor. But he begun to consider discreetly, and as becoming his age, and the excellence of his ancient years, and the honor of his his head, whereon was come, and his most honest education from a child, or rather the holy Torah, the law made and given by God. Therefore he answered accordingly, and willed them straight away to send him to the grave. For it became not our age, he said, in any wise to dissemble, whereby many young people may think that Eleazar, being 80 years old and 10, were now gone to a strange religion. And so they thought him a hypocrite, and despised to live a little time for a moment longer, should be deceived by me. And I get a stain of mine old age, and make it an abominable. For though for the present I should be delivered for the punishment of men, yet should I not escape the hand of the Almighty, neither alive nor dead. Wherefore now, manfully charging this life, I will show myself such as mine age requireth, and leave a notable example to such as a young to die willfully and courageously for the honor of the holy Torah, the law. And when he had said these words, immediately he went to the torture. In other words, his friends came to him and say, hey man, they're going to put you to death if you don't eat this sacrifice, the flesh of this sacrifice, unclean thing. He says, just do it. Just pretend. Eat a piece of meat that is clean. And he chose rather, he says, I've lived a long time, and I'm not going to take for how much more time I have left? Not much. Not much more time left. I'm not for the sake of just having a few more years left to deceive the younger generations in disobedience to the Torah. He literally gives his life simply because he wouldn't eat a piece of pork. Man, does that not say something to us? He is a martyr for some of the least of Yahuwah's commandments. Where was I at? Okay. They had led him they that led him, challenging the good will have bear him a little before into hatred, because the aforesaid speech proceeded, as they thought, for the desperate mind. But when he was ready to die with stripes, he groaned, saying, It is manifested unto the Lord that hath a holy knowledge, that whereas I might have been delivered from death, I now endure sore pain in my body by being beaten. But in the soul I am well content to suffer these things, because I fear Yahuwah. And thus this man died, leaving his death for an example of noble courage and a memorial of virtue, not only unto young men, but unto all of his nation. And then I'll read 2 Maccabees and that, or 7, and that will be it on the reading part. And it came to pass also that 7 brethren, now this one is big, guys. This one's real big. And it came to pass that 7 brethren with their mothers were taken and compelled by the king against the Torah to taste swine's flesh, and were tormented with scourge and whips. But one of them that spoke first said, What would thou ask or learn from us? We are ready to die, rather than to transgress the Torah of our fathers, of Yahuwah. Then the king, being enraged, commanded panes and cauldrons to be made hot, which forthwith being heated, he commanded to cut out their tongues of him that spoke first. In other words, he smart-mouthed the king, and the king said, Cut his tongue out. And to cut off the utmost parts of his body. The rest of his brethren and his mother looked on. His mother was there. There were 7 men, 7 brothers, who were standing with their mother. They cut his tongue out and threw it to his mother, and other parts of his body, and threw it to his mother. Terrible. Now when he was thus maimed in all his members, he commanded him, being yet alive, to be brought to the fire, and to be fried in the pan. And as the vapors of the pan was for a good space dispersed, the exhausted one, they exhorted one another with their mother to die manfully, saying thus, The Lord God looketh upon us, and in truth hath confronted in us. As Moshe in his song, which witnessed to their faces, declared, saying, And he shall be comforted into his servants. So when the first was dead, after this number, they brought the second to make him a mocking stock. And when they had pulled off the skin of his head, they skinned him, they scalped him. They asked him, Wilt thou eat the swine? For thou be punished through every member of thy body. They're going to skin him alive. But he answered in his own language and said, No. Wherefore he also received the next torment in order, as the former did, and he was at last gulp. He said, Thou like a fury tastest us out of this present life, but the king of this world shall rise us up, who had died for his Torah unto everlasting life. In other words, you can kill this body, but my king's going to raise me up. After him was a third made a mocking stock, and when he was required, he put out his tongue. And that right soon, holding forth his hand manually, and said courageously, These I have from heaven, and for his Torah I despise it, and from him I hope to receive them again, inasmuch that the king and they that were with him marveled at the young man's courage, for nothing regarded his the pains. Now, when this man was dead also, the tormented and the mangled the fourth in like manner. So when he was ready to die, he said thus, It is good, being put to death by men, to look for hope from God, to be raised up again by him. As for thee, thou shalt have no resurrection unto life. Afterwards, they brought the fifth also and mangled him. They looked up, they chopped his arms and legs and cut his arm and threw him to his mother. They chopped him up, skinned him alive. It was some extreme torment. and these men were being faithful while they were in pain, guys. That's one of the reasons why this book, that's another reason why this book isn't necessarily in the Bible, is because it's pretty graphic. And it's telling a story of men who were so courageous and faithful that they were willing to give up their life. They're martyrs for the Torah. Can't have that in a hyper-grace society, can we? That's one of the reasons why it's not in there. Where's I at? So when he was ready to die, he said thus, "It is good, being put to death by men, to look for the hope of God, to be raised up again by him. As for thee, thou shalt have no resurrection unto life." Afterwards they brought the fifth also, and maimed him. They then looked up unto the king, and said, "Thou hast power over men. Thou art corruptible. Thou doest what thou wilt. Yet think not that our nation is forsaken by God, but abide a while, and behold his great power, how he will torment thee and your seed." After him also they brought the sixth, and being ready to die, said, "Be not deceived without cause, for we suffer these things for ourselves, having sinned." The whole reason why this is happening is because as a nation, we have sinned against Yah. Anytime persecution at this level comes to Israel, it is always because they have failed to listen to the prophets. They have failed to return to Teshuvah, back to Yah. And he is saying it right here. "Having sinned against our God, therefore marvelous things are done to us. But think not thou that takest in hand to strive against God, thou shalt escape that you." Don't think that you're going to escape punishment. You're going to get it too, buddy. "But the mother," now remember, they've done this all while the mother's standing there. Now let's listen to her words. Woo! Man. "But the mother was marvelous above all, and worthy of honorable memory. For when she saw her 7 sons slain within the space of one day, she bare it with good courage, because of the hope that she had in the Lord. Yea, she exhorted every one of them in her own language." In other words, the king couldn't understand the Hebrew, by the way. So while they're sitting there being brought before the king, she's speaking to them in Hebrew, saying, "Be faithful. Stand for righteousness. Yes, my son, you're going to die, but you're going to be in the presence of Yah here in just a minute." She encouraged them to stand faithful and not succeed to the king's commands. She told them to go to the stake just because they wouldn't eat something unclean. Wow. She exhorted every one of them in her own language, filled them with courage, a courageous spirit, and stirred up her womanism through with many manly stomach. She said unto them, I cannot tell how ye came into my womb, for I neither gave you breath nor life, neither was it that I formed the members of every one of you, but doubtless the Creator of the world, who formed the generation of men and found out the beginning of all things, will also of his own mercy give you breath and life again. He's going to resurrect you to life, as ye now regard not your own self for his law. Now Antiochus, thinking himself despised, and suspected it to be a reproachful speech. He didn't understand what she was saying, so he thought that she was insulting him. Whilst the younger, yet alive, did not only exhort him by words, but also assured him with oaths that he would make him both a rich and happy man. So you know what he did? He realized he couldn't understand what the mother was saying. And he'd already seen that 6 other brothers before him would not disobey the Torah and was tortured and put to death. So his strategy changed with the next one. Instead of going and threatening him, he tells them, if you'll do it, I'll pay you. You'll be rich. You'll be my friend. You have everything that you want. What does it sound like saying? If you'll bow down and worship me, you see all this right here? If you'll just bow down and worship me, I'll give it all to you. So he changed his tactic. The lust of money is what? The root of all evil. Now Antiochus, okay, where's that? But Antiochus, thinking himself despised, and suspecting it to be a reproachful speech, whilst the younger was yet alive, did not only exhort him by words, but also assured him with oath that he would make him both a rich and a happy man, if he would turn from the Torah of his fathers, and that also he would take him for his friend and trust him with affairs. I will put you in power. But when the younger man would in no case hearken to him, the king called his mother and exhorted her that she would counsel the younger man to save his life. And when he had exhorted her with many words, she promised him that she would counsel her son. But she bowed herself towards him. Laughing the cruelty tyrant to scorn, sparked in her country language, in Hebrew, on his counsel. My son, have pity upon me that bare thee 9 months in the womb, and gave such 3 years, and nursed thee, and brought thee up unto this age, and enduring the troubles of education. I beseech thee, my son, look upon the heavens and the earth, and all that is therein, and consider that God made them the things that were not, and so was mankind made alive. Fear not this tormentor, don't fear this man, but being worthy of thy brethren, your brothers, you're worthy of what they've done. Take thy death, that I may receive thee again in mercy with your brothers. She was yet speaking these words. A young man said, whom wait ye? Hold on, Mom. I will not obey the king's command, but I will obey the commandments of Yahweh. That was given to our fathers by Moses. And thou that hast been the author and mischief against the Hebrews shall not escape the hand of God. For we suffer because of our sins. And though the living Lord be angry with us for a little while for our chastising and correction, yet shall he be at one again with his servants. Be thou a godless man, and of all other most wicked, be not lifted up without cause, nor puffed up with uncertain hopes. Lift up thy hands against the servants of God, for thou hast not yet escaped the judgment of the Almighty God, who seeth all things. For our brethren, who now have suffered a short pain after death under God's covenant of everlasting life, but thou, through the judgment of God, shalt receive just punishment for thy pride. But I and my brothers offer up our bodies and life for the law of our fathers, beseeching God that he would speedily be merciful. How long, sovereign Yah, holy and true, until you avenge the blood upon of your servants and upon your prophets. Ooh. And thou be tormented and plagued, mayest confess that he alone is God, and that in me and my brethren the wrath of the Almighty, which is just brought upon our nation, may cease. Thank the king, being enraged, handed him worse than all the rest, and took it grievous that he was mocked. So this man died undefiled, and put his whole trust in Yah. Last of all, the sons of the mother died. Let this be enough now to be spoken concerning the idolatrous feast and the extreme torment. All right, that's all the reading I'm going to give for us. Woo! A few more slides here, guys, and I'll be done for today. The truth about Hanukkah. First and Second Maccabees have different understandings of why the Maccabean revolt succeeded. First Maccabees emphasize the zealousness towards Yah, the defending of the Torah, and the killing of the enemies of Yah as the element that won the day. While Second Maccabees emphasizes the tragic death of righteous men and women, martyrs, as bringing about God's mercy and compassion and overall victory. 1 Maccabees begins with the king's order that the Jews of Moedin, a town of the northwest of Jerusalem, to sacrifice to the Greek gods. In 1 Maccabees 2:5, it records, and the agents of the king who were enforcing the apostasy means against Moses, by the way, against Torah, came to the city of Moedin to sacrifice. And many of the Israelites came them, and Mattathias and his sons gathered together. the soldiers turned to a local leader, and who we know of as Mattathias, and pressured him to comply. In 2:17 it says, "And the angels of the king answered and said to Mattathias, saying, You are a ruler both glorious and great in the city, and supported by sons and brothers. Now you come forward with first and execute this ordinance of the king, and as have done all the nations and the men of Judea and those remaining in Jerusalem. And you and your sons will be among the friends of the king, and you and your sons will be glorified with silver and gold and much compensation. We're going to pay you if you do this." But Mattathias responded with this speech, exclaiming how he and his family will keep the covenant of Yah. But then a different Judean agreed to participate in the abominable sacrifice. And this is Maccabees 1:23. And it says, "And he finished speaking these words. A Judean man came within sight of the sacrifice of the altar of Moedim in accordance with the ordinance of the king." This apostasy, and I say apostasy because that word is very much used in the New Testament, 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. This apostasy of falling away from Moshe, falling away from Torah, falling away from Yah, falling away from Yeshua. This apostasy moves Mattathias to violence and kills his fellow Israelite for apostatizing himself against Yahuwah and Moses, the Torah. This is exactly what this account is. And Mattathias saw this, and he became zealous, and his kidneys became stirred up. And his anger rose in judgment, and he slaughtered him on the altar and killed this agent of the king, who was forcing them to sacrifice at the time and to tear down the altar and become zealous for the law, as Phinehas had done against Zambri, the son of Salem. The author of Maccabees 1 draws the parallel between Mattathias and Phinehas, who killed an Israelite man who was lying with a Midianite woman at the door of the tabernacle. This is Numbers 25:7-8, if you want to read it. The significance here goes beyond just the parallel actions of these two men. As a result of his zeal, Yah offers Phinehas the priesthood. Like Phinehas, the family of Mattathias, which takes over the priesthood upon defeating Antiochus, deserves this reward due to the zealous acts of his patriarch. I'll skip that. Mattathias and his followers form an army to punish the Judeans who betrayed their brethren and the covenant of Yah. In other words, not only were they defending against this evil king, but he was also going to go and purify the land of the Judeans, his own Israelites, who decided to go ahead and who apostatized themselves to Yah. It says in Maccabees 2:44, "And they assembled a force and struck down sinners in their wrath and lawless men in their anger, and the rest fled into the nations to be saved. And Mattathias and his friends went around and tore down the altars and circumcised by force all the uncircumcised boys who found within the borders of Israel. And they persecuted the children of insolence, and their mission was successful by their hands. Mattathias' son, Judah, the hammer, who is described as a powerful warrior striking fear in the hearts of Judah's enemies, followers of followed in his father's footsteps. Like his father, Judah Maccabee is intolerant of Judeans who don't observe the commandments of Yah. In 1 Maccabees 3:5 it says, "And seeking out the lawless, he persecuted them and burned up those who disturbed his people. And the lawless drew back in fear of him, and all the workers of lawlessness were disrupted, and salvation was succeeded by his hands. And he went through the cities of Judea and annihilated the impious, however you say that, from it, and turned away wrath from Israel." This last phrase is exactly what Yah said to Phinehas. In Numbers 25, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, has turned back his wrath from the Israelites by manifesting such zeal among them on my behalf that in my jealous I did not consume the Israelites. In other words, in the time that what was happening is they were being taught by the Baal Peor, remember that prophet? He went in and told them, if you really want to curse Israel, I want you to take beautiful women and have them go have sex with them. So this one Israelite went in and started doing it, and Phinehas went in and killed this man, killed them both while they were in the act. And because of this, Yah gave him the priesthood because he was zealous for Yah. The author of Maccabees is connecting these two things here. The same example is found within the story of the Messiah. When he returns to the earth, he will put to death all of his enemies who stand against his rule. Will he not? Who forsook the covenant of Yah and did not obey and will not obey his Torah. When Messiah returns here, it says that the Revelation records that he slays his enemies with the sword that comes out of his mouth. Why does he slay them? Because they will not accept his rule. His rule is the Torah. Like Maccabees 1, 2 Maccabees tells a story of how Israelite enemies force upon them to violate the covenant of Yah. In 2 Maccabees 6:7, it says, under bitter duress, they were dragged off to eat the entrails of sacrifices on the king's monthly birthday. And when the festival of Dionysus came around, they were forced, crowned with ivory, to make processions for Dionysus. At Ptolemy's suggestion, a decree was issued calling upon the neighboring Greek cities to adopt the same practice concerning the Jews and have them eat the entrails of sacrifices, and to cut down those who did not prefer to go over to Greeks' ways. At this point, instead of introducing Mattathias and his rebellion, we hear stories of martyrdom. In 2 Maccabees, it tells the story of Eleazar, an old man who refused to eat pork or even to pretend to eat the flesh of a pagan sacrifice meal. And his consequences, was tortured to death by the king's officers. Finally, the martyrdom section comes to the most disturbing story of them all, the abominable torture inflicted upon 7 brothers and their unnamed mother, who simply refused to comply to the king's order and remain faithful to Yah and to his covenant Torah unto death. First Maccabees only refers in passing to those who chose to die rather than to break the dietary laws. Imagine, this is the end of it here, guys. Imagine these faithful followers of Yah. Imagine in your mind these faithful followers of Yah, martyrs, sent to the stake, burned alive, cut in half, boiled in oil, beheaded, tongues cut out from their mouth, even hung on the cross, all because they believed in and followed Yah. All because they followed a little small voice inside of them, encouraged them to believe. All because they held on to that little voice inside them that encouraged them to obey. All because that little voice inside them told them, follow me. All because they followed that little voice. All because it encouraged them to be a witness of faithfulness to their generation. Faithfulness, even in the face of a tyrant, even in the face of death. As we speak, according to the Bible, these righteous martyrs, as we speak, as I'm speaking to you now, according to the Bible, these righteous martyrs are under the altar of Yah. They are right next to his throne of glory, in whispering distance of his heart and his ear. These men we just read about, they're standing right next to his throne, right next to his heart, and right next to his ear. I wonder, as I was writing this last night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I wonder what they say to him when they see believers today believing that the Messiah did away with the Torah, even though the Bible states clearly that it was forever until heaven and earth are recreated. I wonder what goes through these martyrs' minds when they had to die, when they gave their life for the very thing that many believers today said that the Messiah himself did away with it. I wonder what they say when they see preachers teaching today declaring pork clean to eat for believers, though just a few 100 years before Messiah's time, they were given the option to live if they would just pretend to eat something unclean. But rather they chose torture and death than even pretend to eat something unclean and disobey the covenant of Yah. I imagine they know what that feels like when even during their generation, some of the Jewish people chose disobedience. They chose apostasy. One day, the mark of the beast will come. Same story, guys. The abomination that causes desolation, Matthew 24, guys. We're talking the same language, the same thing, the same imagery. What was before will be again. There's nothing new underneath the sun. One day the mark of the beast will come, and when it does, will you be able to be faithful sheep? Or will you be among the apostasy? Will you be among those who disobey God's covenant, or who he calls goats? In life, we often face tough situations that push us to our utmost limits. Whether it's financial struggles, health issues, relationship problems. These challenges can leave us feeling overwhelmed and just worn to the bone, tired, already past giving up. However, as believers, we have a powerful source of strength and hope. Our faith in Yah, the love and relationship that we have with one another. That's important. When you're down, I'm down. That means we need to come together to lift each other up, to face the tribulations that we have together. That is what it means to be an Acts 2 God church, is to not let our brothers and sisters face tribulation alone. That if you're in tribulation, what have I been saying? We need to be in tribulation. When you have victory, we praise together. When we suffer together. Why? Because we're brothers and sisters in the Master. Why? Because we're his body. That's why. As believers, we have a powerful source of strength and hope. 1, our faith in Yah. 2, the love and relationship that we have with one another. And the overwhelming examples throughout the biblical history of men and women who bled and died and were tortured for their faith in Yah. As an example to all of us. In the account of Hanukkah, some believers were called to arms, while others were called by Yah to be his witnesses to this evil king, and to show him that not even imprisonment, not even torture or death could get them to break their covenant with Yah. These faithful martyrs were called and prepared, by the way, from birth. Yah doesn't call a witness to go to this stream to give their life up unless he had been talking to them from birth and preparing them to face this trial. These faithful martyrs were called and prepared from birth by Yah for such a hard task as every martyr in biblical history has been called to do, including the very apostles of the Master himself. When we trust in God's promises, we can find counsel and comfort, even courage in the midst of adversity, knowing that God is with us and will carry us through whatever comes our way and can give us the strength to face any challenges with confidence. All of the martyrs we just read about, it was hard to read about them. The stories are almost like, you've got to be kidding. The mother said this to her children. Wow! All of the martyrs that we just read about, they knew Yah was standing right next to them, even when their tongues were being cut out and thrown to their mother. In the Bible, we find numerous examples of people who relied on God during difficult times and found strength to continue forward and not give up hope and not give up faith in trials. Part of following Yah, you're going to face trials. He just wants you to realize that he's going to go through them with you. One such example is found in Isaiah 41:10, where God says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." This verse reminds us that God is always by our side, ready to strengthen and support us in our time of need. However, he does not promise us paradise. He just promises us that he will be with us no matter what. Another powerful verse that speaks of God's faithfulness in tough times is found in Psalms 46, 1 through 3. And it says, God is our refuge and our strength and everlasting presence, help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give away, and the mountains fell into the heart of the sea, though its waters roars and foams, and its mountains quake with their surging. This passage reassures us that no matter what chaotic or uncertain writing this at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm sorry. This passage reassures us that no matter how chaotic or uncertain our circumstances may seem, God is our constant refuge and source of strength. As believers in Messiah, Christians, we can take comfort in the knowledge that we are never alone in our struggles. God promises to walk beside us, carrying us through every trial and tribulation we face. So when life throws struggles our way, instead of giving in to fear and despair, let us hold fast to our faith and trust in God will always be there to guide us. With His help, we can overcome any obstacle and emerge stronger in our faith, ready for the next challenge to come. Let us remember the words of Messiah Himself in John 16:33. It says, I have told you these things, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Throughout the entire Bible, followers of Yah and His Messiah, the saints have always faced tribulation. For tribulation is a part of our faith in Yah, not His wrath. There is a difference. Let me say that again. Throughout the entire Bible, followers of Yah and of the Messiah, saints, have always faced tribulation. For tribulation is a part of our faith in Yah, not His wrath. There is a difference. We will not escape tribulation, but we will His wrath, the woes of Yah upon the wicked, not the testing and purification of the saints. So when we face down the troubles of life, let us lift our heads up from the ashes, knowing that God loves us and is with us every step of the way. The fact that it rains only means that He cries with us too. Let us always lean unto Him for strength and guidance, so that we can face whatever challenges come our way, confident that He will carry us through to victory, even if that victory hasn't manifested yet. Steadfast faithfulness means serving Him through pain. Steadfast faithfulness means serving Him through pain. Serving Him with a broken heart and spirit. Serving Him in suffering. Serving Him through more tears than you can count. Through loss and even through death. James 1:2 says, blessed is one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him. Sorry. That was a little long. I'll turn off the camera for that, for the time's questions. We'll come back to Q&A if you want to. Blessed is a person who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the Torah of Yah. And on His law he meditates day and night. He will be like the tree planted by a stream of water, which yields its fruit in season, and its leaves does not wither. And in whatever he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like the chaff which the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For Yahuwah knows the ways of the righteous, but the ways of the wicked will perish. Sabbath shalom, everybody. Thank you.